I always thought the highway at night was one of the safest places to be. You're not alone out there, but you're not too close to anyone either. Each car has its lane, its speed, its own little destination. Everyone is together but separate, connected only by painted lines and headlight beams. There's something reassuring in that, or at least I used to think so. But now, every time I slide behind the wheel after dark, every time I catch my own eyes in the rear view, I remember that night. The night the road stretched too long, the shadows felt too thick, and the headlights behind me wouldn't go away. It started like nothing at all. Early spring, one of those evenings where the air can't decide if it's done with winter or not. The day had been warm enough for just a sweater, but by the time night fell, the chill returned, sliding its fingers into the fabric, reminding me not to trust the season yet. I'd spent the evening at a friend's place in the next city over. Nothing big, just dinner, catching up, the kind of visit you lose track of time in. We sat around her kitchen table with mugs of tea cooling between us, laughing about stories from years ago, swapping little updates about jobs, family, half-remembered names. I looked at the clock once, twice, told myself I'd leave soon, but the hours slipped away like spilled water across a counter. By the time I finally pulled out of her driveway, it was after midnight. I hesitated at first. I could have crashed on her couch. She even offered, standing in the doorway with her hand on the frame, hair tied back, asking, "You sure you don't want to stay? It's late." I shook my head. "I'll be fine. It's only an hour and a half." That number felt manageable in my mouth. 90 minutes. 90 minutes of open highway, music in the speakers, dark countryside rolling by. I'd done it before. I'd done longer. So I hugged her, promised to text when I got home, and slid into my car. The fabric of the seat was cold against my legs, making me shiver as I turned the key. The dashboard glowed to life, soft blues and reds, the fuel gauge needle twitching upward, the clock confirming just how late it really was. I set my phone into the holder, queued up a podcast, and pulled onto the road. The first half hour was exactly what I expected. Empty lanes stretched in front of me, lit only by my headlights. Street signs reflected back briefly, names of exits I didn't need, towns I'd never stop in. The white dashed lines zipped by, hypnotic in their rhythm. The voice from the podcast filled the cabin, something about history, a war I'd half forgotten learning about in school. My mind drifted, lulled by the repetition of it all. Now and then, another car passed in the opposite direction, headlights flooding my windshield before vanishing into the night behind me. Occasionally, I'd pass someone slower, a truck hauling cargo, an older sedan clinging to the right lane, but mostly it was just me, the road, the hum of tires, the soft warmth of the heater against the cold seeping at the windows. I was relaxed, almost too relaxed. The kind of state where you don't think about the drive, you just let the car carry you. That's when I noticed the headlights. At first, it was nothing, just a glow in the mirror, distant and unimportant. Another driver on the same stretch of road. I barely glanced at them. But minutes passed. The glow grew closer, brighter, until it settled at a steady distance behind me. I changed lanes casually, expecting them to pass. They didn't. They changed lanes too. I frowned but told myself not to be weird. Plenty of reasons for that. Maybe they were using me as a guide, sticking with my pace to break up the monotony of empty road. Maybe they weren't paying attention at all. Still, I sped up a little, just to see. They sped up too. I slowed, easing back to under the limit. Their headlights adjusted, shrinking just enough to keep the same distance. That was when the first knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I tried telling myself stories. They're just nervous. Maybe they're from out of town, don't know the route, and feel safer near another car. Maybe they've been on the road for hours and the rhythm of following someone is keeping them awake. I almost convinced myself. Almost. But 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The headlights never left me. Every time I glanced up, they were there. Perfectly aligned. Too close to be random. Too deliberate to be chance. I could make out the shape of the car now, a dark SUV, maybe black, maybe navy. It was hard to tell in the limited light. The windshield was a flat shadow, the driver just a darker shape inside. I told myself, don't look so much. You'll spook yourself, Just drive. Focus on the lane. Focus on the road. But it's impossible not to check. The mirror became a magnet. My eyes kept flicking upward, stealing glimpses I didn't want but couldn't resist. Every time, the same lights, steady, patient, refusing to fall away. I remembered a story I'd heard once in high school, a teacher warning us about highway safety, about people who played games with strangers on the road, following too closely, cutting them off, even chasing them. I'd laughed it off back then. We all had. But now, alone on a dark stretch of interstate, that story crawled out of the past and wrapped itself around me. I tested them again. I flicked on my blinker, slid into the right lane, slowed nearly to a crawl. The SUV eased back, then slowed too, keeping perfect pace. Okay, I muttered under my breath, gripping the wheel tighter. My palms were damp. I turned off the podcast. The silence hit harder than I expected. Without the background chatter, every sound felt amplified. The hum of the tires, the faint rattle of something in my glove box, my own breath louder than it should have been. 10 more minutes, 15. They never passed me. The knot in my stomach had grown claws. I'd told myself I was imagining things, that it was just a trick of distance and coincidence. Highways at night can play games with your head. A car feels closer than it is. Headlights blur together. Time stretches when there's nothing to do but stare forward. But coincidences don't last 40 minutes. Coincidences don't mirror your every move. I tried to give it reasons, to hand the whole thing back to logic. Maybe they were nervous. Maybe they didn't like driving alone. Maybe they were from out of town, hugging my bumper because they didn't trust their GPS. I even told myself maybe they were just zoning out, half asleep at the wheel, unconsciously matching me because it was easier than making choices. But the knot in my gut knew better. My body had already decided, long before my mind could argue, this wasn't normal. The SUV stayed exactly where it was, not too close to force my hand, not too far to let me forget. A shadow with teeth just outside my reach. I remembered another drive years ago, long before this. I was in college, heading home after visiting friends, cutting through back roads because I thought shortcuts made me clever. Somewhere on a narrow 2-lane highway, a pickup appeared behind me, riding close for miles. I'd hated it then, the way the brights filled my mirrors, the way every bend in the road felt tighter because someone else was crowding me. But eventually, they passed. Just a random driver in a hurry. I'd shaken it off. This wasn't that. This wasn't impatience. This was deliberate. The exits appeared and vanished. Each green sign promised a way out. Gas, food, lodging. I stared at them too long, debating, and then watched them slip away as if the decision had already been made. What if I pulled off and they followed? The thought alone was enough to make me clench my jaw until my teeth ached. I flexed my fingers on the wheel. They were slick with sweat. My palms squeaked slightly against the leather. The wheel itself felt different now. Not an object, but an anchor. If I let go, if I swerved, if I slipped, everything would unravel. The podcast was already off. The car was quiet except for the engine's steady hum and the hiss of tires rolling over pavement. Every few seconds, the seam in the road made a soft thump under me, a heartbeat I couldn't control. The dashboard glowed a dull orange, too dim to feel safe, too bright to ignore. The clock ticked minutes I couldn't measure properly anymore. I told myself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. But each breath felt shallow, like my lungs were staging a protest. My chest stayed tight no matter how much air I dragged in. Another 20 minutes. The SUV stayed put. I thought about calling 911. My phone sat glowing in the mount, the map's blue line crawling forward like a fuse burning towards something I didn't want to see. But what would I even say? Someone's following me. I imagined the dispatcher's voice, calm and skeptical. Are they really? How do you know? And what if they told me to pull over and wait? The very idea made bile rise in my throat. I glanced in the mirror again. The lights were steady, unwavering, too steady. The longer I stared, the more I felt like they were staring back. I remembered being a kid, riding in the backseat of my parents' car at night. I used to press my face to the window and watch headlights in the distance, wondering who those people were, where they were going. It had seemed magical then, the idea that strangers were traveling through the same night as us, living parallel stories that might never touch. Now, that same thought felt poisoned. This wasn't parallel. This was pursuit. I tried another test. I pressed on the gas, letting the car climb past 70, then 75. The hum deepened, the tires sang louder. The SUV followed, closing the gap just enough to make my pulse spike. I slowed again, easing down to 60, then 55, drifting toward inconvenience. Any normal driver would have passed by now, thrown me a dirty look, sped ahead. The SUV didn't. It just adjusted, holding steady, like a predator pacing with prey. I cursed under my breath, words that sounded hollow in the quiet. My voice felt out of place, like noise in a church. The silence pressed heavier with every mile. Without music, without chatter, the car didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a waiting room. I could hear things I'd never noticed before, the faint whir of the heater fan, the rattle of a loose pin in the console, the occasional creak as the car flexed over uneven pavement. Each sound seemed sharp, foreign, like it didn't belong. My thoughts circled back again. What if they were just heading the same way? What if I was building a monster out of nothing? But the idea fell apart as soon as I touched it. Coincidence doesn't mimic you. Coincidence doesn't breathe down your neck for nearly an hour. I thought about my mom, about her old habit of texting me, home safe, whenever I drove late. How many times I'd ignored it, rolling my eyes, thinking it was overprotective. I pictured her waking up to a call that wasn't from me. I pictured her asking why I hadn't trusted myself sooner. My chest tightened harder. The bridge came up, metal guardrails reflecting my headlights in stuttered flashes. The SUV stayed close as we crossed, lights glaring against the mirrors until they seemed to swallow the cabin whole. My reflection in the glass looked washed out, pale, unsteady. I barely recognized myself. I remembered something I'd overheard in a gas station once. Two truckers talking, one warning the other. Never let anyone box you in, on the road or in life. If they control your space, they control you. At the time, I thought it was some macho road wisdom. Now it felt like scripture, but I didn't know how to take my space back. Every adjustment I made, the SUV mirrored. Every move I tested, they followed. It was like we were connected by an invisible thread that only they could cut. I checked the fuel gauge again. Just under half, enough for now. Not enough forever. The thought of pulling into some lonely gas station with those headlights still behind me made my skin crawl. I pictured the SUV rolling in after me, cutting off my only exit, leaving me trapped under buzzing fluorescent lights with nowhere to run. The exits kept coming. The signs promised salvation, but the thought of seeing those headlights curve off with me was worse than staying. So I drove on. My shoulders ached from the tension. My legs were stiff, locked against the pedals. My mouth was dry. The inside of the car smelled faintly like the fast food wrapper I hadn't thrown away earlier, and suddenly that scent felt sickly, overwhelming, like it belonged to another world where things had still been normal. Time was breaking apart. Minutes stretched into hours, hours collapsed into seconds. I couldn't tell how long it had been anymore. Just me, the road, and those unwavering lights. I whispered to myself again, "Stay calm, keep driving, don't stop." The words weren't a command anymore. They were a lifeline. And still, the SUV followed. I don't remember the exact moment I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Maybe it was the 100th time I checked the mirror. Maybe it was the way the SUV's headlights filled the cabin so completely that I felt like I was being swallowed whole. Maybe it was the truth that I couldn't keep driving forever. The exits kept flashing past like lifeboats I was too afraid to board. Every time I imagined them following, curving down the ramp, sealing my fate. The fear of confirming it kept me on the highway, but the longer I stayed, the more I realized I was being whittled down, mile by mile. My hands were stiff on the wheel. My body felt brittle, like glass about to crack. The car smelled faintly like coffee from earlier in the day, but even that ordinary scent made my stomach turn now. Finally, I saw it. Rest area, 2 miles. A chance. Maybe the only one I'd get. The sign glowed against the blackness like an invitation, or maybe a dare. My first thought wasn't relief. It was panic, because if I turned and they turned too, then I'd have my answer. No more excuses, no more rationalizations. My blinker clicked on, loud, unnatural in the silence. My heart hammered so hard I thought the sound might carry outside the car. And in the mirror, the SUV drifted with me. The knot in my stomach liquefied. I could feel sweat dripping down my temple, soaking into my collar. My throat ached with dryness. The ramp curved, carrying me toward the glow of tall lamps in the distance. For a second, I imagined flooring it, staying on the interstate, abandoning the exit at the last moment. But it was too late. My wheels were committed, carrying me off the safety of the highway and into something else. The lot opened up ahead, pools of yellow light spreading across asphalt, a few trucks, a handful of cars. Not empty, not full. My headlights swept the rows, catching glimpses of sleeping faces, tilted heads against glass, a man standing by a vending machine with smoke curling from his lips. I pulled into a spot under the brightest lamp I could find. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the whole world to see me if something happened. The SUV slowed behind me. My pulse stuttered. I gripped the wheel so tightly my wrists ached. It rolled past, not stopping, not confronting, just gliding by like a shadow with no weight. It carried on to the far edge of the lot, where a light flickered, broken, leaving the asphalt in shadow. It parked there. I couldn't see the driver, just the dark block of the vehicle, silent, waiting. I sat frozen. I couldn't bring myself to move. I listened to the tick of the cooling engine, the faint ringing in my ears from adrenaline. My eyes never left the SUV. Minutes passed. 10, 15. They didn't move. My phone sat in the holder, glowing faintly, showing me nothing useful, just a blue arrow, a map line waiting for me to continue. I thought about calling 911 again. But what was I going to say? That someone had followed me off the interstate, and now they were just parked? I pictured the dispatcher sighing, asking me if they'd hurt me, if they'd even gotten out. I pictured the word no sticking in my throat. So I waited. Finally, movement, not from them, but from someone else. A trucker climbed down from his cab a few spaces away, yawning, stretching his arms overhead. His presence felt like oxygen. Proof the world still existed outside this nightmare. I made my choice. I grabbed my bag, shoved the door open, and half walked, half ran toward the restroom building. The overhead lights buzzed. The vending machines hummed. Every step I expected to hear another door slam, footsteps rushing behind me. Inside, I leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face, gripping porcelain until my knuckles went white. My reflection looked hollow, pale skin, wide eyes, lips pressed so tight they'd lost their color. I told myself, wait, just wait it out. But when I stepped back outside, the SUV was gone. The far corner of the lot sat empty under the flickering light. I froze. My heart soared with relief and crashed with dread at the same time. Where had they gone? Back onto the highway? Circling the lot? Waiting on the ramp? Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to hide inside the building until daylight, to wait for more people. But the thought of standing still made me shake. I felt like prey that had lost sight of the predator. And that was somehow worse. I forced myself back to the car, each step slower than the last. I slid into the seat, locked the doors, restarted the engine. My headlights cut across the asphalt, empty, harmless. I pulled onto the ramp, back toward the interstate. My chest ached from holding my breath. The highway stretched out again, empty. For miles, I saw nothing behind me, just black road and faint stars. But I couldn't relax. My shoulders stayed tight. My eyes flicked to the mirror every few seconds, each glance braced for those same lights to flare back into existence. And then I thought I saw them. Far back, a faint glow on the horizon, just at the curve of the earth. My stomach flipped. I couldn't tell if it was real or not, if it was a trick of the road, another car entirely, or the same one waiting just out of reach. Every curve of the highway, every overpass, Every exit became a test. My eyes searched the dark, waiting. By the time I pulled into my own driveway an hour later, I was shaking. I left the engine running, staring at the mirror one last time. The street behind me was empty, silent. I should have felt safe. I didn't. Because the truth is, I'll never know. Maybe they had finally grown bored. Maybe they were playing some cruel game and decided to let me go. Maybe they were testing how long I would last before breaking. Or maybe, in some version of the story I didn't live, they had been waiting for the right moment. That's what haunts me. Not what happened, but what didn't. The silence. The choice to follow without revealing why. The refusal to pass, to leave, to speak. The decision to let me drown in my own imagination until I was half mad with it. It's been years now, but I still feel it. In the way I keep my tank half full. In the way I text before and after every trip. In the way I map every rest stop before I ever leave home. And in the way I still check my mirror every few seconds, no matter how empty the road is. Because sometimes, the scariest story isn't the one where the monster attacks. It's the one where the monster waits. Where it follows. Where it leaves you alive, but never lets you forget it was there. I lived. I made it home. But a part of me never left that highway. A part of me is still watching those headlights, mile after mile, waiting for them to reveal themselves. And I know, deep down, that if I ever see them again, I'll recognize them instantly. Because some shadows don't fade, they just wait for the right night to return.